Hello, BookTube, Ros here. Now, we all know that March is the month of multiple things, readathons, March Mystery Madness and March of the Mammoths and Middle Grade March and there's the Irish Readathon and the Jewathon and oh my goodness. But one of the lovely things happening this month is March of the Moderns, organised by Margaret Pinard, and she invited us to read books published between 1901 and 1945. And when I heard her announce that, March of the Moderns, the things that naturally sprung to mind for me were like Virginia Woolf or James Joyce, the modernists, who are like really consciously trying to break with literary tradition, to experiment in their writing, and that's something that I really enjoy. A kind of period of writing that particularly appeals to me. But weirdly, that is not what I've ended up reading, because in the British Isles, that period of writing is known for a few things, and one, interestingly, as it's also one March Mystery Madness, is it was a golden age of crime writing here. But another thing that it was, particularly as I say in the British Isles, I think, is a bit of a golden age of the comic novel, the humorous novel, and because of two presents that I received this month, and I have them both here, so I'm gonna do the hold your book up thing. Is Tilly, my daughter, gave me a copy of Summer Lightning by P.G. Wodehouse, and Shawn, the book Maniac, posted me a copy of Much Dithering by Dorothy Lambert, and so I've read both of those, and that really kind of like reminded me of as I say, what a wonderful era of British humorous novels, that particularly the sort of 1920s and 30s was, and I thought I would share a bit about that with all of you, and maybe kind of inspire you with some things you might like to read. Now, I have to say that the big hitter, okay, for this is good old Woodhouse. Now, probably you will be most familiar with his various Jeeves and Wooster books. This one, The Inimitable Jeeves, is one of my favourites. All he started writing books with Jeeves and Wooster in them in the sort of teens, like about 1915, 1916 is maybe the first one. But I'd say the best, or when he went on almost up in, I think up as late as 1970, I think might have been the last one. But the best ones were written in the 20s and 30s, I would say. And what wonderful books they are. I really, if you've never read one, I can't enthuse enough. Now, Summer Lightning is one of his Blandings series. Now, so they're set at Blandings with the main, yes, a kind of wonderfully eccentric upper class family of peculiar people like Lord Emsworth, whose number one interest in life is his pig, the Empress of Blandings, prize winning and very beautiful creature, of course, and a key plot device in this story. Yeah, they're this was 1929 this one was written, and there's a kind of a touch of farce, I suppose, about the story. It's the kind of book where as well as having eccentric characters, people end up jumping out of windows or hiding under beds and to avoid embarrassing situations. There's also, being Woodhouse, there's always a bit of a love story going on, but or sort of sort of young people succeeding or failing and getting together or choosing the wrong person, or and having aunts that will disapprove. He is very good on slightly scary aunts. Is Woodhouse. That's a problem that Bertie Wooster has as well. He makes. Why do I like these books? He makes fun of people powerfully, but in a way that is never mean, and actually I would say one of the particular pleasures of the Jeeves and Wooster books is Jeeves is very clever. Bertie Wooster is he's often portrayed as just like an idiot, but actually he's a really kind of warm-hearted, good-natured chap, and a lot of the pickles he gets into is because he's trying to help people, trying to do the right thing, or sort out a problem, or he's very loyal to his friends. Yeah, wonderful books, and so honestly, some of the funniest stuff in the English language was written by P.G. Wodehouse, I would say. Um, Now, also writing about those sort of upper classes and with a lot of humour, but perhaps a bit, little bit darker and with a bit more sort of variety of characterisation and plot, I would pick Evelyn Waugh. Now, Evelyn, sorry, Evelyn's the female version. Evelyn Waugh, it, it, probably best known these days for Brideshead Revisited, and in some ways that's a very fine book, but in some ways a less appealing one because it's taken the upper classes terribly seriously, whereas his books that I enjoy most are ones like Decline and Fall, or Vile Bodies, or A Handful of Dust, this one here, that were written, in the 20s, 30s. um, Scoop, that would be another, and have this lovely satirical humour that's sort of pulling apart that society. But generally, his characters, they're probably a bit more real and rounded than you get in these. It's I was going to say they're more literary, but actually, you could not. I mean, you don't get better humorous prose than Woodhouse, to be honest. There's nothing. They're finely crafted, these, but yeah, War's got more sort of perhaps literary pretensions. Another book that I would highly recommend with the similar kind of eccentric upper class family relationships in it is All Passion Spent by Vita Sackville-West. I haven't got a copy of that. I used to, but I have it on Kindle, but not to show you. Written in 1931, and yes, it's got one of my all-time favourite older characters, and that's Lady Slane. She's 88 years old. She's just been widowed. She's spent the last, I don't know, 70 years, um, 70 years being a kind of loyal and decent wife, and supporting her, Lord Slane in his career and all of that. And when he dies, his family expect her to, I don't know, retire into a quiet corner and be no trouble. And instead she kicks up her heels and moves out, goes off to live in a little rented house in Hampstead and decides to have fun, all the fun that she never had all through her life. Some really brilliant comedy of manners in there, but it's also quite a touching book. Yeah, and with some, I suppose, more. It's more. Well, I was going to say political. That's slightly the wrong word, and Vita Sackville-West would probably not thank me for saying it's feminist either. But it's about self-determination, I suppose, and women being able to make choices in their life. Yeah. Um, definitely one I would recommend. Now, if you want another brilliantly funny female character in a book of that period, it's got to be Flora Post in Cold Comfort Farm. 1932, so we're always in the 20s and 30s here, and written by Stella Gibbons. She wrote a few books, but it's definitely this was her masterpiece. And Flora is, again, upper class girl, but both her parents die, and she finds herself in a state of financial embarrassment. She's a little impecunious, and she's not quite sure what to do, and she needs a bit of time to think about it. And she realizes the one set of people that you can just wish yourselves on, and who kind of have to keep you, are your relations. And she happens to have a set of rather eccentric relations who live in rural Sussex on the Starcadders, and she sort of descends upon them and just decides to kind of rather take over their lives and reorganise them. It's very funny. it's sharp, brilliant, crisp prose, um, eccentric, exaggerated characters, but not unreal. Yeah, probably more realistic than a Woodhouse character, but at the extreme, more extreme perhaps than the Vita Sackville-West or Passion Spent or the War, Wars say. Absolute surefire winner, I think. Yeah. Now, thinking about female characters sort of with a degree of kind of financial discomfort, my next suggestion is E.M. Delafield's Diary of a Provincial Lady. That one's 1930, so same period. And the narrator in that, because it's in kind of like mock diary form, the narrator is someone who's kind of on that cusp of, I suppose, lower upper class or upper middle class, desperately trying to keep up appearances, to deal with the hideous Lady Box. She's one of those sort of monstrous characters. It's her little struggles and how she gets caught out with things. The humour in it is delicate but profound. Honestly, it's had me giggling, without a doubt. And very sort of quite an appealing protagonist. You empathise with her in her sort of struggles, as it were. Now, thinking still on the sort of provincial theme, let's go to Mapp and Lucia, the Mapp and Lucia books by F Benson. Now, they're set in a small town in Sussex. Again, of course, Sussex connection here. And it's kind of based on Rye, probably. And it's like a comedy of manners, I suppose. A comedy of manners. And it's in the small town society you've got these kind of women almost like vying for who's the sort of the queen of the local society, and it's a small world, but their little battles. But it's, again, yes, it is sharp and funny. It's closely observed human nature. It's affectionate, not harsh, and just like enormously enjoyable. Yeah. These are all books I love, you can tell. Now, that brings me to, well, I suppose all of these I'd say are very well written books. The fact that they're funny books doesn't mean that they're not written with, tremendous style and quality. But that created, I suppose, in that period, it was quite like a market for books that were probably aimed at women readers and had a kind of humorous quality, but maybe also a little bit more of a romantic plot line in with the humour. So you don't get that in Mapp and Lucia, but you do in what's sometimes called, they're kind of like middlebrow women's fiction from that era, I suppose. One example would be Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. Now, this is published by Persephone, and there's a couple of publishers that have a good line in this sort of thing, if you know what I mean. And Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day is perhaps like one step down the social rungs, if you know what I mean. So Miss Pettigrew is more sort of middle class poor, and try that theme of trying to keep up appearances or get by, like not lose your gentility whilst not really having the finances to sustain that life. So she's working as a governess, but finds herself in a misplaced in a different work assignment from the agency that normally sends her off for governess positions, and ends up having a tremendous adventure and a wonderful happy ending, and a kind of with a little sort of romantic happy ending as well. Which brings me to last book I'm going to talk about, which was Much Dithering, that was sent me by Shawn. And this is another of this sort of middle-brow women's humorous novels. This one is there's like a Dean Street Press have actually got a whole series of these. They call them the furrowed middlebrow books. There we go, a furrowed middlebrow book. And in Much Dithering, isn't that just the best title for a book? This book is the most tremendous fun, but also quite preposterous. It does very much the Mapp and Lucia sort of thing of having a small community and sort of vying for their social positions, and a lot of humour in it comes out of that. But it also has a kind of strong romantic plot and a sort of the sort of slightly put upon young widow, in fact, finding her way to a happy ending. Yeah, foolish but charming and funny, and in that great humorous tradition of the period. This one was written in 1938. One common theme you'll have noticed in all these books is that they're all about a kind of upper class or upper middle class kind of social group. And you might think, oh, do I really want to read all the time about those people? But it works for comedy novels in a British setting. Basically, lots of British humour links to class, but there's much more fun in and comfort, I suppose, in laughing up rather than laughing down. So books that poke fun at the behaviour of the upper classes are yes, I suppose, a warmer and happier tradition. You don't really want to read a book that's poking fun at people who are actually poor and struggling. Dickens does it sometimes, and it's sometimes it's fine, but sometimes it's not his nicest characteristic. There's a much more enjoyment in laughing at the antics of Jeeves and Wooster, or the men and women in Much Dithering, than now. I mean, for example, later on we get things like H.E. Bates, The Darling Buds of May, and that's kind of making fun of rural people now in a way that is actually less comfortable and enjoyable for me. I love these books that are having fun with the foibles of the rich, or those that are trying to keep up appearances despite sort of genteel poverty, and such a very British thing, I think. So, have you read any of these? Have you got another book that you feel fits in that kind of humorous genre that I'm describing? From are there American or Australian equivalents, or whatever country you're from? Did you get a lot of kind of comic novels in that same period, and how do they approach that? Is it in a similar way or different? I would love to hear more, because these give me a lot of pleasure. Whereas I probably wouldn't read much in the way of funny books written contemporary to me, if that makes sense. There isn't the same appeal to those at all. I'm not sure why. Have a good week, and share me your thoughts about good humorous books.